The DNA of this party is to be pro-free market, hostile to Russian adventurism, uh, uh, possessed of a sort of confidence in the American experiment that is not in evidence in Donald Trump's movement. They are enthralled to him, the man, the personality, but the movement below him is a mile wide and an inch deep.
If Donald Trump does win, what does this mean for the American right? Many traditional conservatives have held their noses for years, but does a second Trump victory mean they'll have to accept that he is the American right for now? Noah Rothman is a writer for the National Review, and he had a bit of a sense that things are moving Mr. Trump's way and that he will get a majority in the Electoral College. Is that how you see the race at the moment?
It's very difficult to parse the polling that we have right now because it is so close. Any movement could be attributed to methodological problems or a sampling issue, maybe not necessarily movement among voters. But that being said, in the aggregate, it does look like Donald Trump has momentum in the closing days. And if there's just not enough voters for Kamala Harris's superior turnout operation in the swing states to turn out, then Donald Trump looks like he will achieve an electoral college majority. It's very, very close right now. It's hard to say, but he does have momentum, and that's helping him. To your point at the outset, what happens to American conservatism if he loses, or if he wins, rather? The prospects are not great. An entire generation will have grown up in the United States not knowing a condition in which both parties run for office by simply promising more expenditures, more raids on the federal treasury, and very little unanticipated consequences associated with them. Certainly no offsets. And that will just become the norm. American conservatives should be very leery of that prospect.
Let me come on to that in a moment, but let me just stick with the moment with the campaign. We've had the news that Mr. Trump's longest-serving chief of staff, John Kelly, says that Trump meets the definition of, quote, a fascist and was unfit for office. Now, I would suggest that in pre-Trump days, that would be devastating for any presidential candidate at this time in the election. But I raise the question to you now. Is it?
No, I don't think it is. First of all, it's news only insofar as Mr. Kelly has gone on record in audio saying this. These allegations were retailed previously in 2020, and in 2023 he revived them. So anybody who's a political junkie will have consumed them already. And voters understand that Donald Trump has a penchant for praising strongmen. I don't think this was going to come as a bolt from the blue to political observers. He has this distinct capacity to look at dictatorial regimes and say they really know how to get things done. He says that in public as well as private. I believe Mr.
But
Kelly.
Mr. Kelly says this includes Hitler. It's not just Erdogan in Turkey or Putin in Russia or the strongman that used to run Brazil or even Z or Rocket Man in North Korea. Mr. Kelly claims he's asked questions like, why can't I be supported by my generals the way Hitler was supported by his? Of course, I would add that it shows he doesn't know much about history because the generals actually a lot of the time tried to assassinate Hitler. But that's another matter.
Yeah, that is an anecdote in the story that he had to be informed by Mr. Kelly about the fate of Erwin Rommel. Yes. Nevertheless, I don't necessarily think that Republicans are going to fail to compartmentalize this, and they don't have improper rationales to do that. There are, in that very story, there is a claim that Donald Trump balked at the $60,000 cost of burying a veteran. That allegation now has on the record denials from the family of that veteran. Now, you can impugn the editorial decisions of Jeffrey Goldberg, who authored that piece. But what some are trying to do is go after John Kelly's credibility in order to impugn that accusation as well, or at least limit its reach. And I find it a little difficult to make the leap because John Kelly's service record is sterling. His record in the administration when he served as DHS Sec and White House Chief of Staff is very strong. And his recommenders are very strong and still beloved in the MAGA movement, like Senator Tom Cotton from Arkansas. So it's going to be a heavy lift to impugn his credibility. I just don't think it matters. All the bad stuff that you hear about Donald Trump's instincts are compartmentalized by Republican voters with the assumption that he will deliver tangible benefits to them and be a proper steward of their interests. And all the other characterological defects that are associated with Donald Trump are just shuttled off into the back of their minds.
If Mr. Trump does get his second term, I think he's the first, I think only Grover Cleveland was the other president to serve 2 terms that were not contiguous. One didn't follow the other. If he does that, you will have American conservatives, so the small c, will face a president in for another 4 years that doesn't really seem to care about the budget deficit, doesn't really seem to care about the national debt, which is now way over 100% of America's GDP. Indeed, plans to add to it quite substantially, according to the Office of Budget Management. Thinks that China will pay the tariffs, and that tariffs are a way of raising money, neither of which is true. And all conservatives know that as well. And it's basically a big spending, big government kind of president. Where does that leave you?
In no good places. The ballooning national debt. First of all, Donald Trump's the United States has been dining out on the fact that it is the world reserve currency for a very long time. And both parties, presidents of both parties, have been using that as a backstop to justify their respective spending binges. If Donald Trump were to realize his universal global tariffs, it would certainly jeopardize the status of the dollar. We are blessed insofar as Congress does retain a fair amount of power over the imposition of tariffs that aren't related to national security issues. But Congress has been delegating its power to the presidency for a very long time. And if Republicans were to retake both chambers of Congress, which is a live possibility, they could be inclined to defer even more to Donald Trump's wishes, especially if he were to get a significant mandate in the Electoral College, a significant blowout victory would mute a lot of this opposition. There just is no principled opposition among Republicans to the power of the personality of Donald Trump and the assumed affections of his voters. It's not necessarily Donald Trump they're afraid of. It is the power of the cult of personality around Donald Trump among Republican primary voters, a small universe of American voters, but nevertheless a very influential one. That has enthralled to him.
I was watching this new movie about Ronald Reagan, the biopic about Mr. Reagan, and it did strike me, looking at what he stood for, his attitude towards immigration. He was proud that people wanted to come to America because it was such a great country. He was a he was a supply sider, but he did think the deficit did matter and that you had to tighten government spending. I would have thought Mr. Reagan must be turning in his grave at what's happened to the Republican Party.
I mean, I would hope so. I'm certainly turning in my bed, so we could be in the same, just turning the two of us. But if you look at the polling of Republicans, if you abstract it and you take Donald Trump out of the equation, Republicans writ large have not become national populist, big spending progressives. They still, they're very leery of illegal immigration. They do want to see the illegal migrants coming over the border staunched, the flow staunched, and those returned, but they're not hostile to legal immigration, skilled or otherwise. Republican voters are not afraid of the ravages of the marketplace, certainly not more than they are government intervention. If you were to look at Gallup polling this year, which found that more voters, including Republicans, fear the intervention of the marketplace or intervention of the federal government in private affairs more than they do the market. And these are old Reaganite values. They are still there, yes, bubbling just below the surface. The DNA of this party is to be pro-free market, hostile to Russian adventurism, possessed of a sort of confidence in the American experiment that is not in evidence in Donald Trump's movement. They are enthralled to him, the man, the personality. But the movement below him is a mile wide and an inch deep. Republicans like me, or conservatives like me, have been taking solace in that. But Donald Trump's power has been gradually remaking the Republican Party. And there is no guarantee that in 4 years after another Trump presidency that will still pertain. It will have been 14 years in which Donald Trump will have been the dominant figure in American politics, and there's no way to erase that legacy.
Well, let me just finish this with a quick question. If Mr. Trump was to lose, and of course it's still possible that he will lose on November the 5th or the aftermath of that, would that be the more traditional, the more mainstream conservative opportunity to try and get the Republican Party back? Because he would be twice a loser.
Yeah, I mean, it would be, but those of us who have anticipated a snapback to the status quo anti-Trump have been routinely disappointed by the failure of that prediction to materialize. So it'd probably be foolish to continue to make that prediction. Nevertheless, as I said, the ingredients are present. What conservatism lacks in the United States right now are champions. Full-throated, confident, aggressive, not hostile, aggressive champions and promoters of their ideas.